Good morning. The date and time is 9:30 a.m. on Wednesday, October 18th, 2023. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Nevada Taxicab Authority Board. We are at the Nevada State Business Center at 330 West Sahara Avenue, Suite 400. I will call us to order, and the record should reflect that present are members Decker, Graff, Vice Chair Soderberg, myself, Dan Research Chair, and we are expecting Member Trujillo to join us by video. Was unable to, he's not on yet.
He's not on.
Okay. So if he's not able to make it, he's excused. And I would ask Graff if he would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Record sheet also reflects that Administrator Armstrong is here and our Deputy Attorney General. And I would ask Madam Secretary, based on the materials in our binder, it appears, and please confirm that this meeting has been properly noticed and posted pursuant to the open meeting law.
Yes.
Thank you. First item of business is public comment. This matter is set forward on our agenda pursuant to NRS Chapter 281 for the purposes of the public providing any comments they would like to make to the board on matters within our jurisdiction. No action may be taken, but we are welcome. We are here and welcome any comments from the public. First, determine whether there's any member of the public present in the hearing room that would wish to address us at this time. Seeing none, are there any members of the public participating remotely that would like to comment? There are no indications of remote participants who wish to comment, so I will close the first public comment session. First item for action on our agenda is approval of the board meeting minutes of September 20, 2023. I believe all board members have had an opportunity to review them. Are there any changes, additions, or corrections?
There's some minor typos, but I don't feel the need to go through them.
Okay.
No.
There's okay. You'll let her know about the minor typos.
Sure.
I'll entertain a motion.
No motion to approve.
Moved and seconded, Decker and Graff. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Next item on our agenda is discussion for action of an application for event surcharge rates. Application filed 3 October 2023 by Ms. Rushton. Take appearances.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board, Administrator Armstrong. For the record, I'm Kimberly Maxim Rushton with the law firm Cooper Levinson, appearing on behalf of the Livery Operators Association. And joining me today are several members of the LOA, and in particular, Mr. Brett Bell, the president of the LOA. If I may begin.
You may, please.
Thank you. The matter before you today is an application requesting to add a surcharge to the applicable taxi rates here in Clark County, specific to the F1 rate, or F1 race, excuse me. As you heard from Mr. Bell during the last meeting, the objective here is to primarily incentivize drivers so that when we do have the F1 race, we have an ample supply of transportation services available for our visitors. After careful consideration, the operators have come together and have the proposal that is in front of you. However, we do have a brief amendment to that, and at this time, with your permission, Chair, I'll turn it over to Mr. Bell to explain the amendment and to walk you through some of the specifics of the surcharge.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, administrator, and staff. Brent Bell for the record, Little C Blue Cab, Henderson Taxi, and the LOA, and I believe I'm up here today speaking for the entire industry. I think we're all in agreement this morning, and I think the rest of them are here and they can be heard if need be. If you'll recall, my presentation last month was in concept. I think everyone here except for member Graff, but I believe you were briefed afterwards on what we were trying to do. You showed up right when I finished. I know you had another commitment, but I know you were brought up to speed. At the end of my presentation, there was only one question, and that was from Administrator Armstrong, and he asked me if $10 was enough. And my response was, I don't know. We've gotten some more feedback over the last month, especially since Kimberly's filing, and we don't believe $10 is enough. We think a number, we've been talking about 20, we think a number of 15 makes a little bit more sense. As I testified last time, the lease drivers will receive the entire amount. The employee drivers will receive approximately 43%, depending on which company they work for. And that's part of the problem. The employee drivers weren't going to be receiving what we thought was enough, but really isn't. So we're here to amend Kimberly's application and to ask for $15 surcharge. Everything else remains the same, exactly as Kimberly has placed in the application.
And Chairman Reeser, I just note for the record that fact that the agenda simply notes consideration of an application for a surcharge. Therefore, I do not believe that the amendment as proposed by Mr. Bell would conflict with the open meeting law in any way.
So the Attorney General's office
Yes, sir.
disagreeing with me, I concur. There's nothing in the notice that sets an actual rate. There's an application. We could give you $5. We could give you $100.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any disagreement with that?
No, sir.
Can you briefly put on the record, because public might not have all read the application, how you intend to implement the rate and for what period of time? Just so the record's clear.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brent Bell again for the record. So effective the Thursday, the 16th, thank you, at noon, November 16th at noon, we will be adding a second tariff to the meter. Right now, all flat rates are tariff number 1, and we have the ability to add a second tariff for the times from November 16th at noon all the way through the following Monday at noon is what we've proposed. And tariff number 2 will automatically include the additional $15 on the drop. We proposed putting a small decal in the back of the taxi cab, easy to apply, easy to take off afterwards. That basically explains the hours and the dates and the reason for the surcharge. Very simple, nothing too complicated. So at the end of the time period on Monday at noon, tariff number 2 will drop off the meter and we will go back to normal rates at that time.
And this, if I understand, the additional surcharge rate, whatever it is on tariff 2, is just going to be added to flat fixed rates. It's not going to apply outside of those zones.
That's correct. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, it will apply to any run leaving McCarran Airport going to the zone, any run leaving the 3 zones going back to McCarran Airport, and any run within those 3 zones. It will not apply to somebody that's getting in a taxi cab at the airport and heading to the Red Rock or the Green Valley Ranch or anything like that. If you're not going to one of those zones in the strip corridors, it will not affect those passengers.
And Mr. Bell, the legend at page 2, line 11 through 14 of your application, that's the decal you're recommending that we adopt.
Actually,
The text of the decal.
we have
Other than the $15, the 10 going to 15.
we have something that's a little more descriptive than that we will propose to you. It basically says effective noon 11/16/23 through noon 11/20/23. There will be a $15 per trip fee on every trip originating or terminating around the airport /strip corridor.
So it's a, Chairman, for the record, Kimberly Maxon Russian, it's a slight variation from the language that was contained in the application, more succinct and everything. And we thought that the carriers looked at it and felt like that was the easiest decal.
Do you need that reread into the record for you? Or?
If they would give me a copy of that, I would appreciate it.
Okay.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Yeah, well, let's let them.
Finish.
I'm holding the mic. Is there anything else affirmatively that you need to present?
Nope, I think that concludes it.
Administrator?
Okay. I'm kind of technologically challenged, so I want to make sure that I understand exactly how we're going to do this because I want to make sure that we can put it into practice. We'll have a second tariff. The question that I have is dealing with travel within the zone, because, for example, if you're not going back from the airport or we're going to the airport from a Stra property, does that mean that anything in zone 1, 2, or 3, the meter will geo fence that area, and anything in that area that comes in or out of that area will be attached to the second tariff? Is that what you're telling me?
Well, it's not, it's all the zones are in the meter
Right.
already. So anytime you get into a cab that's in that zone, that meter provides the drop for that zone. It's going to provide a drop that's $15 more than the normal drop. So nothing's changed from normal operations, except for there's another $15.
I don't have a problem with that. I guess the question I have is that if a party is not going to the airport, but they're in zones 1, 2, and 3, do they still get the $15? I guess that's the question I'm asking.
Yes, sir, they do.
Okay. And how do you do that? I guess, because I'm not technologically.
The meter is going to recognize that you're in that zone.
Okay.
And if you're in that zone and you get into the cab during that time period, it's going to charge an extra $15.
That's what I need.
On top of the zone rate.
Yes, sir.
On top
So
of the
if I'm
zone.
in a hotel, I just want to follow up.
Go ahead.
If I'm in a hotel in zone 1, that's where I'm staying. And I'm going to some venue related to F1 or not to a restaurant in zone 3, I'm going to be charged both the zone rate or just the 15 plus whatever the actual meter is.
If you're going from zone rate, if you're going from within the zone and you're not going to the airport,
Right.
you'll be charged that extra 15 and then whatever the normal meter rate is for that travel. That's correct, Chris? Yes, thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure
Yep.
that.
That's what we wanted
Right.
to know.
No, we're not going to charge the airport rate and the $15 if you're going across the street. No,
Okay,
that's,
what we were.
No.
I think that the administrator and I were on the same page, was not double charging
Nope.
the zone rate. So if it's a $4.50 trip, it'd be,
$19.50
Right,
trip.
okay.
does that answer your question?
That's what I need to know, yeah.
Any other questions, Administrator? Member Decker?
Yeah, I have a few questions. So I look at the traffic, which is essentially what we're trying to incentivize drivers to fight against, to deal with. Yeah, I look at that similar to speedway events where the distance is an obstacle to getting drivers out. So in this case, we're trying to overcome traffic and density as an obstacle to the drivers wanting to serve this area. Is that correct?
Yeah, I can't think of an occupation that's more disrupted from F1 than a taxicab driver, frankly. I mean, right now, it's already been a nightmare for those guys. And we're trying to incentivize them. Our industry wants to put our best foot forward in lockstep with the LVCVA and casino and resorts, provide the best service that we possibly can. And this incentivize drivers to come in and do the best job that they can. They're not going to be able to get to places where they want to go. Obviously, I discussed in the last hearing a month ago that at least in the situation of the marathon where the entire strip is closed, there's still access to every casino, every resort the back way. In this situation, we're going to have 5 major properties that there's no access to. So they're going to be telling their customers, this is as close as I can get you. And we've heard a lot of feedback. They're just not interested in dealing with it. So that's the purpose of this, is to incentivize them, and hopefully they'll come to work and do the best job they can.
Okay, so And so I understand that this is also speculative because we haven't had an event like this here before. And we're trying to figure out what dollar amount would incentivize drivers, which accounts for the change in the request. Is there any input from drivers that the LOA has obtained that speculates on their side as to what might incentivize them, or is this as close as we can come?
Well, we've heard between last month and this month that the lease drivers were extremely excited about it because they were going to get the whole $10. And then I've learned more this morning that a lot of the employee drivers were not that crazy about it because of the employee relationship. They weren't going to get the whole $10. So that's the purpose for the increase that we're asking for you today. Another 15. That's going to get them a lot closer to the $10. The employer at the same time is going to have to pay more payroll taxes, all those types of things when it comes to the employee driver. So we believe in order to properly incentivize the employee drivers, another $5 is necessary. And the lease drivers who basically make their own schedule, hopefully this is even going to incentivize them to work even more. And like I said, have our industry put our best foot forward.
Which perfectly leads into my next question, which you might have already answered. Can you put on the record why the employee drivers only get 43%, not 100%? Because
of employee drivers are employees, obviously, and they earn a portion of the meter. And 43% is a rough estimate of all the companies combined. At my two companies, it's approximately 43%. So they earn a portion of the meter as part of a commission for their payroll. So that's why they're only getting the 43% of the $10. The taxi cab company will be receiving the remainder.
And to the extent that it would help, have you guys, and that this rate increase or this fee is approved, would you be putting the notice on the taxi cabs prior to the event to the extent that the public is entitled to notice, and that we're talking about people who might be in a cab in Vegas and see that prior to F1? Or would you be installing them in the cabs just prior to the event?
I mean, it's going to take a couple of days to get all the decals in all the cabs. So they'll probably, all the operators will probably be starting, 2 or 3 days in advance. And then we'll be pulling the decals at the end. I did inform Harry Reid airport officials of this a few weeks ago. At that point, it was 10. I'll circle back with them and let them know it was 15. And I told them that we would have the appropriate signage in front of their flat rate sign at the time that it started and the time that it ended. And they had absolutely no problem with it and thought it was a good idea and a good incentive as well.
One more, Mr. Sheriff.
Oh, yeah.
So to the extent that which you may not, we would all, I assume, guess that TNCs will be implementing surge pricing during the event. So to the extent that we know or could speculate, will we still be, even after the fees implemented, will we wind up with a fare that's cheaper than TNC surge pricing? Or do we have any way to know that?
Based on my knowledge of how the TNCs work, I believe our fare is going to be substantially cheaper.
Thank you.
During surge pricing, yes.
Member Decker, I would just note that last week at the NTA, they approved a $350 add-on to all of the tariffs on the day of the race. So for limousines operating in and around the F1 race that are their walk-up rates, it's an additional $350 on top of their tariff rate.
So the $15 equivalent to the $15 you're asking for is $350 for. Thank you. That's helpful.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And that was approved, I believe, with 3 larger limo companies, none of the members of the LOA, but other
Yeah,
companies.
for the record, that's not my company.
Yes, sir.
Uh,
None of the
but-
members of the LOA.
But I will say this, our limousine and bus tariff will go up 30%
Mhm.
during the time of the race. So that is kind of consistent with what we're doing here with taxi cabs. And we're obviously locals don't like it, but we've got to incentivize the drivers to come to work as well. So.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Interestingly, I was watching television news last night, which is not something I normally do, and Koval Lane got closed yesterday for construction that has to do with this race. And for some reason, the channel I was watching chose only to interview rideshare drivers who basically said, we're not working. my company, I won't say the name of the company, doesn't give us any of the surge fee. They make the same whether there's a surge or not. I didn't know that, but I thought, well, knew we were going to be talking about this today. I said, well, that's ironic. So when I see something like that, I guess I've got a couple of thoughts. And I know this is first time we're doing it. Do you have in your association the analytical ability to come back to us in December or maybe our January meeting to tell us how this worked out? I mean, what we want to know is we estimate we'd had X amount of drivers who did not want to work, but because of this, we got this. And maybe this is the right amount. Maybe it was a great idea. Maybe it wasn't, but we're not going to know, as you've told, until after the fact.
Absolutely. We anticipate coming back in December or whenever you request, probably preferably before Super Bowl, obviously, and provide you with a presentation from Captain who will have all the analytics and can tell you exactly whether it worked or whether it not worked. By the way, Vice Chair Soderberg, I don't think that's accurate what that rideshare driver testified to. That's only accurate if the governor declares an emergency. So to my knowledge, all Lyft and Uber drivers share in the surge pricing.
Okay.
I mean,
And
that's why we're here, because we have to compete with that competition. This is our way of trying to get our drivers more money so they can compete with the Lyft. And that was, unless there's an emergency declared, they all share in the increase in the surge pricing.
And I didn't take it as gospel. I was surprised that the two drivers they interviewed both said that, even though they weren't asked that question. So that's my concern. Now, knowing that Koval Lane is closed as of yesterday, knowing that you and your colleagues in the industry have testified in the past, when we look at how the numbers are changing, the construction of this event has already put drivers in a position. Where are you now with drivers wanting to drive?
Well, as I mentioned before, we have a pile of people wanting time off for this event. And, you know, you can only give so much time off. We look at our vacation schedules and we've denied, from an employee standpoint, we've denied vacations. And I'm sure all the other companies have done the same thing I have. We've denied vacations for this event because we can only allow so many people off. Now, the lease drivers, it's 100% up to them. Whether or not they're going to come work during F1 at what hours.
I'll interrupt you just for a minute because I understand all of that, but I'm wondering today, October 18th, are you starting to experience drivers not wanting to drive because of all the road closures and they just say, see you in Thanksgiving? Or is it right now, even with these road closures, is it kind of normal?
No, we've been dealing with complaints for a while now, ever since the construction began back in April, with drivers not wanting to deal with it. We've lost a lot of good drivers throughout the industry because they're just sick and tired of the traffic.
Okay.
It's something we've been dealing with for months, and you know, it's getting worse and worse as it leads up to F1, but you know, hopefully this will help incentivize them.
Okay. And Mr. Chairman, that leads me to my last thought. I don't know if it's a question, but when I look at the time that the dates and time that this proposed surcharge would be in effect, the first thing that hits me is that the right time to start it, or should we be starting it earlier? We're hearing that, I mean, I would never propose that we have a surcharge for an entire month. And my old utility days makes me not ever want to think of expanding some sort of rate increase. But I'm trying to put my head in that of a driver. And well, if I didn't want to drive during the event, and we've created an incentive to start pretty much at the start of the event, it seems to me there'll be days before the event that's going to be the same situation. In fact, on some level, situations exist today. And I don't know if I don't know if I were a lease driver, I might not be doing a lot right now, and I might depending on my economic situation, because you can't get around. And they don't have the choice of avoiding it.
That's correct.
Clearly, these rideshare drivers that were being interviewed on the news story that I saw, both indicated they're already avoiding the resort corridor. I thought that was odd because they're being interviewed in the resort corridor, but still, they'd already expressed that it's just bad. They don't want to deal with it. They'll be happy when it's all over. So the question I raise for thought before we get to the point of motion is, do we need to start this a couple days, 3 days earlier, or are we fine with noon on the 16th? And I don't know, and I'm not making a proposal, but I think it's something we need to think about and make a decision on before we leave here today.
Anything else?
That's it.
So a couple of different thoughts. One of the things that I was looking at in this is the request for a deviation from 706-9095, which is the financial requirements. And I necessarily don't have a problem with this because I did have a conversation after the last meeting about the temporary nature of it and the specific event that we're talking about and everything else. But in conjunction with what Member Soderberg and Member Decker have talked about, I think it would be important that we get in return for agreeing to that deviation, that we get some added statistics back regarding this time period. And that would include, in my mind, at least the to and froms in the zone, the to and froms out of the zone, the to and froms outside completely of the zone, and that sort of thing. And the reason why I'm asking is this: what's in place to make sure that we have taxis outside of this zone? And I get the incentives of having taxi drivers in the zone and to drive and pick people up at the airport and for the event and everything else. That's great. Our job is a little bit broader than that. We're supposed to service the entire county. So I want to make sure that these incentives seem to be going towards people working inside that zone and everything else. What incentives do we have to have those drivers to work outside of the zone instead of like fighting for? I parked cars as a kid. You always wanted to get the up top cars and you wanted to turn those back and everything else. Been in transportation since I was a young kid, I guess. So there's always going to be those drivers that are going to try and stay within that zone as opposed to being outside the zone. I want to make sure that we get some response back as to servicing the whole valley as opposed to just that event. So is that something that you're open to, or do you have questions about that?
We'll be, once again, Brent Bell for the record, we'll be happy to provide those analytics after it happens. There is no incentive right now that we plan for out of the zone, but I believe there's still going to be plenty of drivers out there that want nothing to do with going to the strip, and they still have to work. So there'll still be service because they're not going to want to be around that area. So I believe we're going to still have taxi cabs in service, but we'll have to wait and look at the analytics. Getting back to Vice Chair Soderberg's point, we approach this as an industry. It's a very conservative, as you know, approach because it's the first time we've ever done it. I'm not sure if this is the right time or even the right amount of money. And listening to Vice Chair Soderberg and everything that he's talked about, maybe we need to start a day or two earlier. The reason why we closed on Monday instead of Sunday, the race ends at 2:00 in the morning, Saturday night. We wanted to make sure that we had a day to get people back to the airport. It might take an additional day to provide the proper service to get everyone back to the airport. So we certainly wouldn't be opposed to Vice Chair Soderberg's suggestion of maybe starting a day earlier and staying on a day later. Once again, we're in new territory. We've never done this before. So like I said, when the industry sat down, we kind of were very conservative, and now we're hearing that we were probably too conservative. So we're open to Mr. Soderberg's suggestions. And once again, there's no incentive outside except for the drivers that have made it very clear that they don't want anything to do with it. They still have to work. The employee drivers will still have to work. So I believe there's still going to be service in the outlying areas.
And I can tell you that I have family coming and going on the 15th and the 17th of that week, and they're already being indicated from airlines and everything else that it's going to be a significant impact. So meaning even back to the 15th. So I would tend to agree with Member Soderberg that you may want to look at an adjustment of a day or two on each end.
And to that point, I would note the fact that the qualifying starts, so you've got practice on the 16th, and then you've got qualifying on the 17th, and the race is on the 18th. So the local packages that are being offered now specifically are for those days of practice and qualifying. And so that will anticipate transportation to and from the area, starting as early as the 16th, specific to the race, but people will be coming in beforehand. They'll be setting up. And I think, again, to your point, Vice Chair, that you will have congestion and you will have disruption to a point that if people will not want to be in that area. So considering that there is an actual, that people will be in the grandstands on the 16th watching the race, it may be a good idea to start this earlier so that you can accommodate those individuals as they're coming into Las Vegas.
I don't.
Record should reflect at 9:36 a.m. Member Trujillo joined. And Member Trujillo, do you have any questions or on agenda item for the application for the surcharge?
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman. Not at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you. So some similar thoughts to my colleagues. First of all, I think we need to expand the time frame. Thursday to Monday, that's like a typical Vegas trip for people. I don't know that this is typical. And so I would want to, my thought is 15th to the 21st at least. I'd tack on a day on each side, especially because as council indicated, there's actually grandstand time on the 16th. So you'd expect people to at least fly in the day before for that. So I don't have a firm view of whether it should be the 14th to the 22nd. I'm pretty sure by the 21st they'll clear out.
It's Thanksgiving.
But I think there's a lot of somebody who travels to Vegas from other locales that I work frequently. Mondays are jammed with people getting out of McCarran. So I think at least Tuesday on that end, and maybe the 14th, but certainly the 15th. On Vice Chair Soderberg's and Member Graff's queries about statistics and the administrators, I'd also like, so I do want those statistics. I will ask that the motion to approve this include a reporting requirement. And I'd like those statistics to somehow also provide us a baseline that we're, so the control group that we're testing that against. And so I'm thinking out loud, and I want you to tell me how that doesn't work. Do we ask for you to give us the statistics for the 72 hours before the event begins and the 72 hours after it? Or is there some other metric you already have that would give us the control? Does that, what I'm asking, does that make sense to what I'm asking, or do you need me to be more elaborate? I want to compare the statistics you give us about how the surcharge works with some baseline. So is the baseline just our monthly statistics on rides? Is that a fair calculation, or should we craft something else?
Brent Belligan for the record. I don't know where we were going to get a real baseline since this has never been done before. We like to look at things year upon year. So we can certainly provide you the same dates for the year prior in November. That there's one baseline, but then we'd have to anticipate we have F1 and we didn't have F1 last year. So we can provide you year over year, And then we could also provide you with data from the weekend prior, which would probably be better than year over year. So we could provide both of those. And then next year it'd be easy to answer your question, right? Because it would be the second year with F1. But I don't know how to give you a baseline when we've never had this event before.
So I'm good with the year prior statistics, the weekend prior statistics, and the weekend following.
Not a problem.
Yeah, okay. Administrator, do you think that's adequate for staff?
Yeah, I'll put that in the proposed order that we would have, but I think that what's gonna probably end up happening is, and I talked to the parties, that we're gonna have to get that information, and we have to have that information digested both between us, and we'll cooperate with each other in terms of us asking also for certain information when we ask for trip sheets or something of that nature to some of those areas too, in terms of comparing information, so that we can provide some kind of report to this board, because I think we need to have another discussion about this to see if this didn't work, or whatever the situation is, whether we have to make adjustments before Super Bowl occurs. So my argument would be that that discussion would probably end up having to take place at our December meeting at the latest, because Super Bowl is January, February, but I would like to have that buttoned down before we begin our planning relative to Super Bowl. So all of us will know, we all know this is an experiment, and what we're going to try to do is determine, it's almost like an after action report, trying to figure out whether it's worked or didn't work, and what we have to do in order to make it work next time. That's what we have to do. But we got to fine tune it, and we got to figure out how to do that.
Absolutely.
So I'm 100% in agreement. I think we need to evaluate that on the December agenda so that we can actually schedule to hear whether we're going to implement a surcharge for Super Bowl in advance. So I think I agree with that sentiment, and I'm hoping that if we gave you till December, you tell me, Administrator, if we gave them till Monday, December 4th to submit those reports,
That would be good.
and that gives you 2 weeks to
Yeah, get it all together and
get a report to us in a couple days in advance of the next meeting.
Okay.
Is that-
It is, and if you don't mind,
Yeah.
because this is a bit of an experiment and it's speculative, I agree with the other members that we should look at this not as a way to get through F1, but as a way to deal with hundreds of events that occur in Las Vegas every year, including the speedway events that we've talked about, that I've talked about for years. If this works, as the administrator said, and we can hone it down to figure out what the magic number is to incentivize drivers and provide transportation for the public, that's going to be extremely important in the future, far beyond F1 and Super Bowl. And so I think I think us being able to evaluate how effective this is and be able to adjust the numbers is huge. This is the first time this has ever been done.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So this is essentially
It's a test
and
case.
It's a test case
this is,
for a pilot.
no, I understand that.
Oh.
But this is essentially, let's be
Oh.
clear, an answer to TNC surge pricing. We've been thinking about this for years and years and years. So I would just add that it's critically important that we evaluate its effectiveness and be able to adjust it. Because I think this, surge pricing, we've been fighting for more than 5 years. And this is a unique opportunity to see how we can address that. So make sure we calculate the data.
And totally concur, and I think Super Bowl will be another data point for us to tell us if whatever we do based on F1, if that worked or didn't work. And I think this will be a matter of honing this down by a series of orders. I am not, just for to address Member Graff's question, question. I am not troubled by the request to waive under 706, 876. We're allowed to waive that if it's burdensome or unnecessary. It's clearly unnecessary to look, in my view, it's clearly unnecessary to look at the financials of the companies because that's not what this is about. This is about a totally different, we're entering this not to prop up the economics of the industry, but rather to drive behavior of drivers. On that particular, whether, I'm not going to say which company it was, whether you guys are all briefing your drivers, your employee drivers to have these conversations with people in cabs. Yesterday, for my ride from the airport to my office, the only thing my driver wanted to talk about was F1. So either he knew who he had picked up, which is random, at the airport, or this is really top of mind with them. And he told me, to your point, Member Soderberg, what a miserable experience it is to try to drop somebody off in any of the zones right now. And he was very happy to be taking me to the burbs. So, little anecdotal evidence. Any other questions, thoughts?
My 21-year-old son got from the airport to the Raiders game in about 15 minutes on Sunday at about 11 o'clock or 11:30 in the morning. So kudos to the cab driver that did that.
Good to hear.
Member Trujillo, any follow-up questions you might have?
Not at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any closing statements?
No, sir, just would like to take the opportunity to thank you for your consideration of the application. Thank Administrator Armstrong for continuing to work with us on this matter. And again, just appreciate it. We'll come back to you as you've requested with the statistical information. And then we'll have some points to look at as we proceed with the Super Bowl and then next year's F1 race.
I did have one question. I apologize. So you can recap if you need. The 43% on average, are you, I just want the record to be clear. Is that, are you testifying that is the ballpark of what a driver's percentage commission is on the meter, regardless of F1 versus anything else? So it's, they're getting the same percentage, it's just of a bigger pot.
That's exactly correct. And when I say approximately 43%, different companies have different policies. Some pay for gas, some pay for a portion of gas. That's just a rough estimate of all the companies that have employees. It's approximately 43%.
And not that I am recommending, not that I am suggesting this for now. I'm just asking this question for evaluating the statistics. What would happen if the board wanted to, what would be the effect if the board wanted to play with that number? In other words, say 50%. Is that capable of being done, or is the lever we can, is the only lever we can move on employees the total amount of the surcharge? That's what I'm asking.
The only lever you can move is the total amount of surcharge. Many of us have union contracts
Right. That's
and the payroll programs, that type of thing.
That's why I wanted to make sure, just so that the record was clear, that we're limited on the levers we can move relative to employee drivers.
Right. And that's precisely why we came before you today with the increase, because the input we got was it wasn't enough for the employee drivers.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, sir, thank you.
Any other?
No.
Raising any questions?
I'm sure.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bring it back to the board. If somebody's prepared to make a motion, not, we can discuss it for a few minutes.
I would float a motion to approve the $50 surcharge, F1 surcharge.
And for what time period?
I would go with the time period that includes the transportation windows. So the expanded time periods that were discussed, I think we're talking the 15th through the 19th,
15th through the 21st.
The 21st.
15th through the 21st. Okay. I think it's critical that we include the window of high volume transportation, not just the event. People are going to have to get to the event. They're going to have to.
Noon to noon. Noon to noon.
Noon to noon. Yeah, noon to noon. So before I get a second, I want to make sure we got the motion. The motion is to approve a $15 surcharge. That surcharge will be from noon on 15 November to noon on 21 November. The disclosure will be as provided to the administrator. And it will be are you also incorporating the reporting requirements that we discussed?
Yes. Although, yes, and I would request from industry that they be as detailed as possible in providing us the impact of this fee increase in the December meeting.
And Administrator, do you have enough in the record on what the terms of the reporting requirements would be?
Yes, I do, and I'll put that in the order as well. And we will also be doing a guide in terms of pursuant to the statutes and what information we can request relative to the situation.
And one final request, Member Decker, does that motion include a waiver of 706-909 subsection 5 pursuant to 706-876?
Yes.
Thank you. Go ahead. Second.
I'll say, go ahead.
No.
I'll second.
Okay, moved by Decker, seconded by Soderberg. Discussion. Very good. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any- None opposed. Very good. Thank you. That will take us to agenda item number 5, which is industry discussion. This is set on our agenda monthly for the board to receive comments, recommendations, observations, issues from the industry that they have identified in the previous month that should be brought to our attention within our jurisdiction. While we can't take action on these at this meeting, that they frequently end up in a future agenda item. Is there any member of the industry who wants to address us at this time on agenda item 5? Seeing no rush to speak to us, is there anybody online from the industry? No. Seeing nobody participating remotely on agenda item 5, we'll close that matter. Agenda item 6, staff reports. Take it away, Mr. Armstrong.
Okay. I would like to thank the board for approving that event surcharge and the subsequent reporting relative to that. We would hope that this will be a continuing discussion so that we can fine tune this, so we can deal with this as one of the other issues that needs to be dealt with. The other issue would be our yearly reporting of rate increases, and that's something that we have worked with this particular trying to come up with a format and a procedure for your meetings and for the future. But this is a step, these are steps in the right direction. I'd like to introduce Todd Park as our new deputy administrator and our chief of enforcement. Mr. Park, will you stand up, please?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Day 3, so I don't have a lot to report to you guys right now. I've been lucky enough to have Administrator Armstrong give me time to get through the agency, get to know everybody, and that's been really beneficial for me. So look forward to visiting with you guys more in the future.
Todd, so for those of the board members who might not know about your background, will you give us the 1.5-minute elevator speech?
Well, the older I get, the longer I need. I started in law enforcement in a little place called Wyoming. I worked for a 4-man department then a 6-man department, and then I really stepped up my game, went to a 13-man department. And I was very blessed to have very good mentors along the way. I went to Salt Lake in 1996. I spent 22 years in law enforcement there. 19 of those years were in the homicide unit. I became the sergeant over the homicide unit and worked a lot of cold cases and have extensive experience in doing that. I've taught homicide classes all over the country. I have contacts all over the country, and it's just been a very blessed career. That's 6.5 years ago. I retired up there, came down here, and I worked for the Nevada Transportation Authority, and was over there for about 6.5 years, and ended my career to come over here. I was the chief of enforcement before I came over here. So I do have a little bit of transportation knowledge as well as, so if somebody gets killed in a cab, I have it.
Well, first of all, let me
You can
just,
multitask.
yeah. Let me just say that coming over here is not ending your career, not by any means. And secondly, I think you left out that you've been acting chief of enforcement at the Taxicab Authority, in
Yeah.
addition to your duties as chief at the NTA for.
I did have a short stint, yes, over at the Taxicab Authority. Got to know great people over here, man. I have been so blessed to get to know these folks before and get to know them a little bit more now, and just really good people. I'm excited to work with them.
And just wait till you learn, get to know the board.
Well,
Great, well, welcome.
I'm not going to talk about that right
Okay.
now.
Well,
Thank you.
Any questions? Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Mr.
One of the things in my report is that some of our inspection units have been finding accidents that have not been reported to the authority in a timely manner. That is something that we're going to look into more closely and take whatever appropriate action on to that. Also, people that are part of our bumper tap program, we are going to enforce those rules in terms of how that happens. We're sending pictures and things of that nature in order to get those cars cleared. We will do whatever it takes in order to make sure that all crashes of taxicabs, whether they be minor or major, be reported to the agency timely, and we will take whatever action necessary to make that happen. As to the enforcement compliance reports,
Before we get into the reports, can we, there was
Yes.
one item in the minutes that
Sure.
a couple of us
Was that-
noted, and
Yeah.
that was, we asked that you get back to us on the radio
Oh,
situation.
that.
Yeah.
I almost forgot about that. Okay. This is our radio that we just got for all our enforcement staff at this particular point. It's a push talk system that with a specialized radio cell phone type operation that basically has better reception and has reception throughout the valley. This is something that we will use until such time, and Marie, hold up the phone. That's the phone. If you want to touch it, we can let you touch it if you want. If you want.
Remember Decker might be all excited about it.
It looks expensive.
Actually, it was cheaper than what we are in cash, so that was kind of interesting. This is what we're going to be using in terms of handhelds for the officers, both through
I did that.
sorry, through F1 and other things.
Metro will be here in 10 minutes.
Yes, we are in the process of purchasing the handheld units pursuant to what we got approved for the budget in terms of we're going to be doing that. And what we're going to do is we're going to phase that project in terms of the first phase will be to get those handheld radios and get the specs. We're in the process of talking to the provider of those radios in terms of making sure that we are compliant with the system that is presently going online in terms of NDOT and DPS. Once we get that information back, then we purchase the radios for our officers as well as the base units for them, as well as the dispatch unit. We'll do all that, but we're in the process of getting that all together. I would presume that would be completed by December 1 of 2023 in terms of having those units in place. But these units will be appropriate in terms of what Any questions about that?
They're definitely better than FirstNet.
Yes, they are.
Any other follow-ups?
And so these phones have been issued to all of the
Yes,
officers?
they have.
Okay.
And we've taken the cell phones that they've had, we traded the cell phones that they've had to these devices.
Will you continue to deploy these after you get the Harris
Yes,
radios?
yes. These will be our backup situations.
So I don't know if this is the appropriate time to ask this question or not, but I'm sure the chair will tell me. What is our staffing looking like for Formula One? Because I know that we had some holes in some of the positions, that sort of thing. I want to make sure that we're,
This particular
Fully
point, we have, we've extended offers to all the positions that we presently have open at this particular point. We have just received 4 additional new positions in terms of compliance enforcement investigator 2s, and we're in the process of getting those MPD 19s in and getting those positions filled too. So they should be filled before the end of the year. So we will have additional 4 officers. I'm also applying for the December IFC meeting, applying for additional enforcement officers in order to bring that number up to speed so that we have more enforcement officers on, as well as additional people for audit and other areas, because I'm going to put all that into the budget request that we're going to make for IFC for December. So that's something that we're in the process of doing at this point.
But those 4 new positions.
Those 4 positions will go into effect as quickly as possible. Basically, we're in the process of doing the MPD 19s on those. Once we get those approved, then we can put those out for recruitment. There are many people, it seems, that want to come to the Taxicab Authority to be officers. So I don't see a problem in terms of filling those positions with officer 2s.
So,
If I'm wrong, Todd, let me know.
so hang on, the question was for F1.
Those 4 officers will not be.
Not be on.
Right. And just to be clear, you're going to IFC with a request for additional personnel?
Yes.
I will monitor that situation.
Can you explain that process?
The process is that what we do is we make the request. What we're going to do is we're going to make the request based upon the reserve that we have in terms of getting additional personnel. At this particular point, the agency has a $4 million reserve. At this particular point, that reserve needs to be used. So that's where we're going to use in terms of saying, for safety reasons, we need these increased requests, and that's the reason why we're going to make those requests to IFC. And it's not any money that's coming out of general funds, so to a certain extent, that's not an argument that anyone can make to say that we are taking money from education or something of that nature in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. We're just basically trying to use the resources that we do have in order to get up to speed in terms of being able to serve more people and serve more times relative to the officers that we do have and the officers that we need. So we're trying to get back to what we need in order to get closer to more of a 24/7 operation. So that's what we're going to do. And to be honest with you, I haven't had any pushback relative to my management as to this request, and they're all for this request. We just have to make it and see what our esteemed legislators will do with it.
So has the request been made?
The request is in the process of being created at this particular point. It is due next week.
Okay. And then what's the time frame to get a decision on whether it's approved?
The
denied?
decision will be at the December IFC meeting. At that particular point, the money will be released at that point, and then we can do NPD 19s for the new positions and things of that nature after that IFC meeting.
Do we have any holes in, you were just saying that we're not at 24/7 now.
We're not.
Are we going to be 24/7 during Formula One week?
We will not, but we will cooperate with other agencies in order to try to create additional coverage as we need. In terms, we're going to also adjust schedules in order to be able to do as much as we can. If we have to offer overtime for that time frame, we're going to do that. But we will be everybody will be on duty at that time. It won't be a question in terms of that operation.
Is there
I don't think
anything?
we're not running
Well,
grade.
no,
We don't run grade.
but for
Haven't for a while.
But for this event, we probably will add additional shifts relative to that.
Is there anything you need from us as a board or as an authority?
If you have an in with the legislators, that would help me out a whole lot.
be honest with you, I'm focusing on Formula One and these questions and the staffing that's going to occur there. I want to make sure that
We also,
you feel comfortable and the staff feels comfortable with the type of support that you have. So if there is something that you need from us in terms of having those conversations, then ask.
I have to go through the procedures that the state has in terms of doing.
I think the bureaucratic steps.
Process goes as it goes. Okay.
I think Member Decker's filling in similar frustrations with trying to get our savings account used.
Yeah. I would say the most practical thing the board could do to help the agency right now is, I have badges and guns for all of you. If you'd like to work F1, I'm sure that's probably really what Chief Park would want. We're not one.
I'll tell the other comment.
That's it.
Long time since I was a Lockwood bailiff. I took a gun. Okay.
Well, they didn't give, when we were bailiffs, they didn't give us guns when we worked in law.
Well,
They didn't give me a gun.
You and I are like almost a generation apart. So.
I do.
I have one more question.
Also, rural versus urban.
Regarding something that the administrator said, are you now, so if I remember right, there's been a longstanding policy at the TA. I may have implemented it or I may not have, I don't remember, but that minor accidents, the fender benders were not going to be responded to by the agency. You mentioned that you wanted all accidents, whether they were major or minor, to be reported to the agency.
Right. All accidents need to be reported by statute to the agency with a timely manner. Whether they're minor accidents or bumper taps, which can be cleared by dispatch, which is what you put into place, or whether they're majors when we have to send inspector out or send an enforcement officer out.
So this is a reporting requirement. The minors
Yes.
won't be responded to by
They
officers.
won't be responding to
Gotcha.
officers, no, but they will still be part of the bumper tap.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay. Any other general questions before? Okay, I'm sorry to.
No,
Okay.
no.
Fire off on the.
That's fine, that's fine. Okay, at this time, last year, we were at 1.2 million rides. We're at 1.138 at this particular point. We're a little bit down, but we're pretty much close to the 1.2 million rides that we've been generally doing in terms of each month up to this point. In terms of the industry average revenue, that's up by $2, September 23 versus September 22. Our lease revenue is also up pretty much, it looks like the same amount in terms of about $2 from the same time in 2022 to 2023. Number of trips up to this point has been 10,155,000 trips that we've done in 2023 up to this point. That compares to the number of trips that were done in the same time frame in 2022, which was 10,055,000. So we're up in terms of number of trips at this particular point, 22 versus 23 going forward. We still have the same number of medallions because the board has not authorized any additional medallions, nor authorized any additional applications for firms relative to that. Lease medallions, those go up and down, and they can be at the maximum number of actual medallions that a company has. Disabled and elderly rides, I have spent some time with the TAP program, which is our disabled and elderly ride people. I've spent time with them, and they said that there are no problems that presently exist in terms of they are authorizing at this particular point about 1,000 certificates that are given out, and that they haven't gotten any complaints on their end, but I'm in the process of checking with my people as to whether we have gotten any complaints relative to that program or anything dealing with disabled or elderly rides at this particular point. And I also check with the companies about how it's going relative to that. That's something that is something I'm going to have to do in the future because I have not done that yet. I've only done the contact with the elderly services department, aging and disability services. We're a little bit up in terms of credit card transactions, September 2023 versus August 2023. We're at 557,000 in August of 2023. September was 599,000. so we have more credit card transactions. In terms, in September, wrote 32 citations, 35 violations. We've only done one impound. That's an area that we're going to try to beef up. This process, Chief Park is going to do an analysis as to where we should deploy people and shifts and things of that nature. And once he comes up with that plan as to how people are to be deployed, then we will implement that, and hopefully that impound number will go up based upon that plan. Next page deals with all the dispatch calls. We got a total of 652 dispatch calls. Most of those calls were for accidents that were reported to the agents. Most of the citations, as usual, are violation of traffic laws and violations of safety, comfort, and convenience in terms of what we've written citations about. And the monthly vehicle report in terms of showing how many cabs are in service and out of service. You can read that at your leisure. And according to what we have at this particular point, the number of cabs that were in service out of the 3,530 were 2,765 for the month of September. Future agenda items, there may be an additional application in December for a possible transfer of certificates. That will also go along with the report that the board will receive relative to our event surcharge issue in terms of those. So there will be two big things on the agenda for December to discuss. So that meeting may run a little longer than what you usually expect. Any questions?
So citations and UPTs are down significantly.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Is that just a staffing issue?
Yes.
Okay.
And an allocation issue too.
Can you explain that?
In terms of allocating, at this particular point, we only have 1 to 2 people that really like to do impounds at this particular point. We're going to have to realign our staff so that we actually have an actual impound unit that can actually go out and do it and that kind of thing. That's what we want to do. That we're doing catch as catch can at this particular point, but now with Todd here, he can develop a system in which we can do that. We want to be more proactive as opposed to reactive in terms of the actions that we take. And that was something that in my limited abilities, I could not do, but Todd can do.
Okay. And then the dispatch report, that's really helpful. Is that new? It's new, right? I don't remember this.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
Yeah.
No?
I think
It's cleaned up a little bit, to be easier to read.
it was harder to read.
Bigger font.
I read it this month, so thank you. But that's very helpful. So I know you've been acting as the chief investigator and also the ALJ. And I noticed the total number of violations resolved or waived before hearing. But that doesn't tell us the disposition, right?
For 2 routes, or 2 revocations,
2 applications.
and the other ones were resolved. 29 were resolved.
Well, but it doesn't tell us how. resolved.
Oh,
Whether they paid a fine, whether they were dismissed, whether they were.
It's not down in, I get it.
The hearing's held.
So do we, I mean, do we know how those 29 were resolved?
I would say that there were 29 guilties in terms of that kind of situation, because usually, in most cases, when the matters go to hearing, they're usually found responsible.
Before we leave that section, that was one of my questions is, excuse my ignorance, as to the number of hearings held, it's guilty, not guilty, and then denial. So there were 2 hearings held and 2 denials. Can
Yeah,
you
part
tell
of
me?
the problem with that in terms of having an ALJ in terms of hearing officer, what we had done was that I tasked David Groover of the NTA to do the hearings for us because we felt it was a conflict of interest for me to do the hearings, considering I was also acting as enforcement chief at the same time.
So just tell me what's the difference between a denial and a guilty versus not guilty?
A denial is in the situation in which whether we're going to make determinations whether someone's permit needs to be revoked. And also denials are we deny permits based upon background checks and things of that nature in terms of someone applies and we say we want to do a denial of that permit based upon their background, and then they appeal that to the administrative court.
So
So
the
the permit-
supplement for you, guilty or not guilty is on the citation.
Citation, that's what I'm.
Denial or revocation is on
A permit
permit
denial appeal.
application.
Okay.
Appeal.
And dismiss is on all of them.
Right.
I'm just saying we don't have that though, is
Yeah.
my point. So you don't know what the hearing was held on. So, but what you're telling me is there were 2 hearings that were held, they were on
Yeah. I deny.
somebody applying for a license.
applying for a license,
renewal,
they had
and we
something in the
denied
back.
them.
They had, we
Okay.
denied
That's
them
what
and
I
then they
needed to know.
appealed. Yeah.
Yep, thank you.
And none of those were overturned. Okay,
No.
so I would just say that the one category that's not very descriptive would be the total number of violations resolved. We don't know how those have been resolved. We don't know if they were dismissed, whether the waive meaning.
They're waived. They come in and instead of going to court, they just pay the fines.
Gotcha.
Waived.
So we can assume that all of these that were resolved, that were waived,
29, yeah,
they paid the fine in lieu of a hearing?
So there were
Yes.
citations.
Yeah, there were citations that they waived their court, just paid the citation.
Gotcha.
That's what I.
And they get a discount in terms of if they do it.
Right.
early.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. So theoretically, someone couldn't walk in, challenge the citation, and have it dismissed on site. They would.
No,
that
they have to
would
go to a hearing. on
Okay.
that, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
No.
I have nothing.
One other question. So the last page is cabs in service. What information do we have on cabs not in service?
That number is based upon what our inspectors take out of service at any one particular time in terms of what we're talking about. So the number of cabs in service means those were the number of cabs that when we did our count, that was the number of cabs that were available to be in service at that particular point. So about 1,000 cabs are either not being used as cabs, to be sitting in someone's yard, or have been taken down by our inspection staff because of mechanical problems.
The difference between the total number of medallions versus
That's-
just
that's-
cabs
that's
in
correct.
service. Do you ever keep statistics on that difference?
We are fully aware that the number of medallions are not being fully used by all the companies in terms of, we don't get into the reasons as to why that is, because those medallions belong to those companies unless this board, in their infinite wisdom, wants to reduce the number of medallions to particular companies because they're not being used, but that's not something we as an agency. We're just monitoring in terms of what the number of people are using at that particular point in time. So we're not the action area dealing with that. That would be your role.
Correct me if I'm wrong. This is Mr. Graff. So the medallions is kind of a constant number. It hasn't changed.
That's correct.
It's what's we've issued. Cabs in service, I think of as a snapshot on one day. Right?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm trying to
yeah.
get my arms around. And I'm still
Yeah, yeah.
getting,
No.
feet are definitely still getting wet in this job for me. And I want to make sure I know what we're talking about. And I think I did. And you answered the question. I just wanted to know, like, if we monitor that the difference and the reasons why. That's all.
We just reported so that we kind of know how many cabs can operate throughout the valley in terms of servicing the valley. It does have an effect in terms of the amount of service that we can provide in terms of the valley. That is true, because in a perfect world, we would like all our cabs to be fully operational and operating throughout the valley, including the triangle in terms of the corridors and things of that nature. That's our wish, but I don't think that we're ever going to get to the point of being at 100% in that kind of situation, based upon just factors that are beyond our control.
Just asking the question because
No.
it kind of dovetails in with the in the zone and out of the zone questions. I have.
We don't have that information, but we can get that information if that's something that you require.
And I would just add that the industry has talked about this in recent past, and there are, there are cabs, I suppose they're out of service, but there is no purpose or incentive for companies to turn in medallions they're not using. So,
Yeah.
so there would be no reason to do that. And then, if I remember right, the companies are deploying cabs and drivers based on business and volume, and that doesn't necessarily warrant 100% of cabs being on the road at any given time. So that's what I remember from.
Yeah, during the CPCN application, we had a fair amount of testimony on that. I think the other thing is, I'm going to oversimplify this so the industry can roll their eyes, but
That usually works well.
no, for me, we don't tell them which of their cars they need to put the medallion on for that shift. So if they have the newer cars and they want to put those out on the street, they might run the same car for all 3 shifts with a different medallion on it, or the same medallion. So we've had testimony about they use their medallions differently from company to company. So, and pick the vehicles, you know, if they want to deploy for that day.
We
I
also
don't know
have,
that we need to get into that. My view is, I don't need to get
and one
into
of the other
that.
things you need to understand is that in terms of, we talking to the industry also is having a problem, like we are having problems with fleet services in terms of getting vehicles, in terms of what we're talking about. So you may have the medallions, but because your car is 10 years old and you have to take it out of service, you can't use it anymore, even though you have a medallion for that car is not usable until you can get another replacement vehicle for them. Fleet services isn't a big deal in terms of the car companies at this particular point. And that's the discussion I've been having with the industry about how you get cars in order to be able to put them on the road at this particular point in time.
Parts availability for some of the older cars, there's, you know, new fender and that kind of thing. Okay.
Understood.
Any other questions?
No, sir.
Member, questions are good. Member Trio, do you have any questions on statistics and?
No questions.
Great. Anything from legal counsel?
No, sir.
On legal counsel, so where are we on getting a hearing officer? Because Gruber, if that, he can only do 2 cases in 1 month.
Well, he has another job.
Yes.
He needs to get his priorities.
Yes, it's another job. We're moving forward in terms of the process. I think that hopefully before the end of the year, we should have something.
Any other future agenda items members need put on? That'll conclude agenda item number 6, and that takes us to agenda item 7, our second public comment session for today. This matter is set on our agenda pursuant to Chapter 281 of the Revised Statutes. Take comments from the public on matters within our jurisdiction. We may not take action, but we welcome comments, but not from members of the industry who did not comment. No.
Good morning, Mario Lakasha, General Manager of Deluxe Taxi. First, I want to thank the Taxi Authority staff that every time I need them, I don't have representative, voicemail representative. They always answer. From Marie, Kurt, I want to thank them. My comment is on Soderbergh. I didn't fall asleep. I watched the same bit. Fox News, taxis don't exist because the CEO is about $2 billion into rideshare. But the next bit, I don't know if you followed the next bit, which as of today, they still don't know how to get their employees in from Paradise to the Wing to work. So where am I getting with this? Complaints are going to be through the roof because the cabs are going to have the same problem, basically walk. So I just want to put it out there that we have that in mind. And that's.
Also, there was another thing that happened this month that I actually took a ride along with one of our officers. Something came up in terms of someone asked the question as to whether or not where were the taxi stands at the Sphere. So I decided that I would take a road trip and go to the Sphere and see where the taxi stands were. I found that there were no taxi stands. There were rideshare stands, but there were no taxi stands. And that we actually followed a cab. He was trying to drop some individuals off at Sphere. I believe it was a Western.
There's none.
And he dropped him off at Harrah's, and then I approached him. He thought we were going to arrest him, and I said, "No, we're not going to arrest you. He told him that the administrator would ask him some questions for you. Could you answer his questions? So one of the questions I said, so where do you drop people off if you're going to go to the Sphere? And he said, there's nowhere. And that made me concerned because I'm wondering at this particular point, are there facilities still out there that don't have places for taxis to drop off? But you care more about rideshare than you care about the taxis. And that's something I think is going to be a research project for me to figure out where in the area that we don't have stands and what we can do about it.
There's a timeshare 3950 Kovo, and I couldn't make this lady happy. I literally parked the car, walked her and gave her the money back. And that's just, it's going to be a problem. So,
And you're just saying it's going to be a problem for F1.
oh, those 3 days,
Yeah.
there is no way in. Like I said, as of yesterday in the news, after the rideshare bit, they don't know how to get their employees in.
Mhm.
So that's going to be an issue.
So my only public comment on that, Mario, is maybe I'm not trying to put it back on you, on the industry, but perhaps the industry needs to have some piece of paper for for riders those few days that says, this is the situation in these locations, so that you're at least proactively, you have a proactive customer service announcement, as it were. So that's up to you guys, but my comment would be, if it were my business, I'd I don't think that cab drivers should have to give a narrative, because that'd be a problem.
But
But if
as of
there's-
right now, there's only one timeshare that's affected all the way into the race. And
Yeah.
that's that one behind the Venetian.
Yeah.
It's Kovo's, and you can't get in. That's the only entrance.
Yeah,
So
I know the one you're talking about.
that's,
I got stuck on Koval.
I couldn't make this
Without-
lady happy for nothing.
But again, public comment, a few months ago, I made a similar statement to some folks in B&I that I thought there should be some kind of a customer service piece of information that was being given, because people who are coming to town for the F1 may have no idea what it's doing to the traffic patterns. And I don't know that the F1 people were interested in doing anything like that. So anyway, you may want to consider if there's something to save yourselves the aggravation, but thank you. Any other members of the public present that want to give comment to this? Is there anybody online that is anxious to talk to us? No? Then I will close agenda item 7, public comment, and entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second the motion?
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Yay.